In this lesson, we're going to look at evaluating expressions. Specifically in this lesson, we're going to take a look at evaluating expressions that are linear, quadratic, polynomial, rational, and radical. So evaluating expressions is something you've done for quite a long time, but I want to take the opportunity in this specific video to address some issues related to tips, tricks, and cautions when doing evaluation. So our first example that shows some of the tricks and tips and cautions is right here. We're supposed to evaluate 4x squared plus 6x minus 19 at x equals -3. So what does evaluate actually mean? It means that we're going to take this x value that we're defining as -3, and that's what we're going to plug in for x in both of the locations of x in the expression that we're working with. Now, why do I call this an expression instead of an equation? I call it an expression instead of an equation because there is no equal sign. All it is a single mathematical expression. So when I bring this -3 into the x's, I'm not solving for anything. I'm simply bringing that -3 in, and then I'm going to simplify this statement to a single number because there's going to be no variables left. So we're not solving, we're evaluating and simplifying. So make sure you understand that difference. We're not solving for x. We're plugging something in for x and simplifying it. So what are the tips and tricks for doing that? Here's what I would recommend. Okay? Whenever you plug a value in for a variable, always put the value in parentheses. So here's what I mean by that. When bringing the -3 in, I'm going to go 4 times -3 in parentheses squared. So notice the 4 and the squared are still there, but the -3 is all by itself in parentheses where the x was, plus 6 times -3 minus 19. So one of the benefits of doing that is, the way I've written this, if I plug that straight into my calculator as written, 4 and then the parenthesis, -3, close parenthesis, square it, plus the 6th, open parenthesis, -3, close parenthesis, minus 19, I end up with a simplified solution of -1. Now, the question is, what happens if I don't put things in parentheses, if I don't follow that trick or tip? Then I would enter it into my calculator as 4 times -3 squared plus 6 times -3 minus 19. So if I do that, if I plug it in without the parentheses, what I end up with is a solution of -73. That's a whole lot different than the -1 that I got over here. And I can tell you that the -1 is the correct solution. So the question is, why? What's the big difference? And the big difference primarily comes from the situation of the x being squared. Okay? So if we look at the two different scenarios from this portion, comparing these two, I've got 4 times -3 squared, and I have 4 times -3 squared. The issue in both of these is how I've written the square piece. In this first case here, it's the entire -3 being squared, which is what it's supposed to be because it's x squared. What is x? -3. So it's the entire -3 that needs to be squared. In this case, what the calculator is interpreting this as is -1 times 3 squared. So it's doing 3 squared, which is 9, and then multiplying it by -1 to get -9. When in reality, what is it supposed to be? What is -3 squared? Well, -3 times -3 is a +9. So when I then go to multiply by 4, I get a 36 here, but I get a -36 here. Two completely different numbers that will throw off the solution, which gave us the -73 instead of the -1. So the trick in this problem, or the tip and the caution in this problem, would be this: whenever you plug a number in for a variable, in this case -3, whenever you plug that in for a variable, always put it in parentheses like I did right here. And if you do that, you should be safe, and you should be able to plug this whole thing into your calculator all at once. Go ahead and give it a try both ways and see how you get the difference when you plug it in this way in your calculator as opposed to that way. So another type of expression that we're going to take a look at in simplifying in this unit is rational expressions. Now remember, rational expression is an expression that has one statement over another, one polynomial divided by another polynomial. Now the caution here is that division. Because everything in the top is divided by everything in the bottom, we have to be careful that we complete the entire top first and the entire bottom second before any of the division happens. So the tip I would have for you in a problem like this is do the numerator first, get an answer. Do the denominator second, do an answer, and then put them over each other as your final answer. And the trick here, the tip here, is still the same. Whenever we plug our x value of 4 in for x, always put it in parentheses. So I'm going to write this as 4 times 4 to the third minus 13 all over 6 times 4 in parentheses squared plus 3 times 4 in parentheses minus 2. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to focus on the top. I'm going to type it in exactly as I see it here written, okay, with the parentheses. So 4 parenthesis 4 close parenthesis to the third power minus 13. And when I do that, I end up with a numerator of 243. So I did the numerator by myself, or first, before combining it with the denominator. I did it by itself. Now I want to look at the denominator. Again, I put the 4 in parentheses in order to make sure the math stays straight. So I'm going to plug it in directly as is. So 6 parenthesis 4 close parenthesis to the power of 2 plus 3 parenthesis 4 close parenthesis minus 2. And when I do that, I get a 106. Okay. So plugging 4 in and simplifying produces 243 over 106. Now, in the directions of the homework packet, it says to leave it as an improper fraction. Don't get a decimal approximation unless it's an application problem. This is just a generic problem, so it's going to be left in improper form. Now we need to check, though, if we can reduce the 243 over 106. If I work through that, I'm going to find out that there's nothing that they have in common, top and bottom. So this is actually in reduced form. So this expression, this rational expression here, evaluated at x equals 4, is equal to 243 over 106.